Okay, ready to start, ladies and gentlemen? Let's begin. Okay, either work or won't. So tonight's class is always dedicated in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi Ben Yosef. His neshama should have an elevation, and I believe we're live on Chabad.org, which that's a miracle if we are. Baruch Hashem. So we're going to talk about unicorns. You know what unicorns and honest politicians have in common?
They're hard to find.
Not hard to find. They're both a myth. They're a myth. They're both imaginary beings. How's that? No, so we're going to talk about the Tachash, which is in this week's Torah reading. And we're going to discuss the question if the Tachash is a unicorn. We'll soon get to it. More importantly, we're going to discuss the Tachash in our lives. So we'll spend a few minutes, a good 20 minutes or so, discussing the Talmudic sources, the commentaries on the Tachash. And then we'll get, God willing, into the most important discussion, which is always a discussion for the me. What lesson can I take? What's the lesson that I need to internalize in my life from a unicorn? Okay? Ever wondered that question? What can I learn in my life from a unicorn? From a Tachash? If you've never thought about that before, that's fine. That's why you come to these classes. So I'm going to start in the beginning. I'll just tell you that the unicorn is a mythical creature that was popularized in European folklore. I'm reading right off Wikipedia. What? No, so actually the first root, I was very curious to understand where does the idea of a unicorn come from in secular, what's the source for the story, for the myth? And it goes back to at least 400 BCE, where the first person to write about was a Greek historian called Setisias, I don't know, times of Darius and Achashverosh. I think that the English names are complicated. I guess someone reading Hebrew names is Achashverosh, how do you pronounce Achashverosh, right? To me, to read Araxes is, I don't know. But that's the time. And there is the first document. Well, I'm going to say everything. I'm just giving you the history. I was just very curious to know what is a unicorn from the secular perspective. I'll tell you soon in a minute what Torah says. Just go, you have to work your way to get to the depth of to appreciate the beauty of what Torah says. You got to start from the beginning. So the shell, the klipa over here, in the first documented source of the idea was opening of a unicorn is from this Greek historian from he was describing the regions of India, Tibet, and the Himalayas. And there he writes that in India you have these wild donkeys, which are as large as horses or even larger. Their bodies are white. Their heads are dark red, and their eyes dark blue. I'm reading from what he writes. They have a horn in the middle of their forehead that is 1 cubit, about 1.5 inches, and they also use cubits in length. The base of this horn is pure white. The upper part is sharp and a vivid crimson. The middle portion is black. Those who drink from these horns made into drinking vessels are safe from any convulsions and falling ill and sickness. That's the first written source of the idea of a unicorn. The horn, the protection from any kind of illness, etc. Aristotle writes about a unicorn, how there's these Indian horses that are single-hooved as opposed to cloven-footed, like a kosher animal. A hoven is a not kosher animal. Very interesting the way he describes it. We'll get to if it was a kosher animal or not soon. Julius Caesar writes about it, how you have the existence of a stag, which is a horse with a single horn, much taller and straighter than any he had ever seen before. The Roman historian Aelian writes about it. He describes the spiral of the not a straight horn, but a spiral horn. He writes how they have all the different colors, how they're gentle, but they stay in solitude, how they're impossible to capture. Pliny the Elder writes about it. Okay.
Who said that? After Julius Caesar, who was the next one?
After it was Aelian, Aelian, writing in the 2nd century CE. And he says that they were red in color, not white in color. Okay, anyway, there's more, but you get the point. Now, my dear friends, what does the Torah say, right? What does the Torah say? So let's open up this week's Torah reading. This week's parasha, we have the building of the Mishkan. The Jews sin with the golden calf, and God says, you want my forgiveness? But also the Mikdash, the Shachanti Nesocha. Make for me a sanctuary, make for me a physical home with physical walls, physical couch, and physical vessels. And in that physical home, that is where I should dwell. And that deserves a whole class for its own. Why is a spiritual God dwelling in a physical home? But that's not for tonight. But God didn't just say he wants a home. He was very specific about the kind of home he wants. And that's also another class of its own. I have a lot of segues we could go here, but we'll stay focused. We're riding the horse. So God gives us a list of 15 different materials that he wants to be used in the construction of the Mishnah. Okay? Bezalel was the architect. We actually, if you remember last year's class, I don't know if you have a good memory. I was tempted to do last year when we read this parsha. The meaning in the Bible was Bezalel, who was the architect of the Mishkan. Now we're going to talk about one of the materials used in the building of the Mishkan, and this is the Tachash. So the Torah says, and this is good evening. How are you? And this is the offering that you shall take from them: gold and silver and copper and blue and purple and crimson wool. That means wool that was dyed these different colors, and linen and goat hair. And then verse number 5, ram skin dyed red, tachash skins, and acacia wood, shittim wood. Tachash skins. David, you ever heard of tachash skins? Never heard of tachash skins before. Okay, don't feel bad. What is a tachash? So Rashi comes to tell us. Let's look at the Rashi right there in the gray. Rashi tells us the tachash is not the name of a color. It's not that there's a color where we have tcheles, the name of a one color, and you have another color called argamon, etc. So you have a color called tachash. No, tachash is not the name of a dye. It's the name of a painter. You go to Home Depot. There's 45,000 different pink peach, purple peach, yellow elephant peach, ice cube, melted ice cube. We won't go there right now. So it's not the name of a color. It wasn't made of someone at Home Depot. It's the name of an animal. Says Rashi, this was a species of an animal that existed only for a short time, and it had many colors. The word in Hebrew for colors is gavanim. Therefore, Onkelos in the traditional translation in Aramaic of the Torah, when Onkelos translates this word tachash, how does he translate it? He translates it as the word saskoina. The Hebrew word, or the Aramaic word rather, for saskoina is actually two words. Sus, what does sus mean? Happy. To rejoice, to be happy. And the letters sin and samach are interchangeable. And it boasts, it's proud of its many gavanim, of its many colors. Hence, the Aramaic translation of the word tachash is saskona, which means an animal that rejoices in all of its colors. Multicolored, beautiful colors. What? Saskona in Hebrew, modern day Hebrew, saskona means multicolored. Okay, so the original source of that Hebrew word would most likely be this Aramaic word used by Rashi in this week's Torah reading, quoting from Onkelos, who was a convert that was a nephew of the Roman emperor who converted to Judaism and translated the entire Torah into Aramaic, the language of the time. What? Just in time for Purim. He translated the whole Torah like the English of the time, and it's considered one of the most authentic translations. He translates tachash as an animal that is saskona, that rejoices in the many colors that it has. Okay. So we still need to understand. Very nice. So we have this tachash animal. We have the wool. It's called, a few call it dyed purple, dyed crimson wool, turquoise. We have ram skins. We have all these different dyed red. And then we have a unique animal called the tachash. And this tachash was a unique kind of animal that had beautiful colors, many colors. So what kind of animal is that? Where is that animal now? What happened to it? So many of the Talmud, both the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, and the Jerusalem Talmud, both discuss this tachash. Now, in the Babylonian Talmud, I'm going to show it to you in a second, this discussion of the tachash is like really interjected in the middle of a much bigger discussion about the laws of ritual purity and impurity. And if an oihel, a tent, can impart impurity, if you put the skin of an animal, etc., we're not going to go into this discussion of the Gemara at all. It's complicated, it's complex. It's interesting, like people think, the Talmud, we were talking in a class last week, the Talmud would explain how Talmud works. It's like interwoven into a dialogue about the purity of a tent that had a skin, comes in a discussion of tachash, and then it comes back later on the next page of the Gemara, it goes back to the tachash, trying to figure out if it's a kosher animal, not a kosher animal, etc. So let's see. For those that are sitting here in the room in front of me, you have a copy of the text of the Gemara. This is from Shabbos, Tractate Shabbos. page 28A and 28B. Okay? Shabbos 28B. And if you're watching on my personal Facebook page, you can see the English translation, the text in Aramaic and in English. So it's to ask about the Tachash, about the impurity. So then I started like a kind of in the middle of a sentence. What is it about the Tachash that existed in the days of Moses? That's the Gemara's question. What is it? It says in the times of Moses in the Torah that there was a Tachash. What kind of animal was that? So the Gemara quotes a statement from Rabbi Ella that said that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said that Rabbi Meir used to say, we have a tradition going back for many generations, that the Tachash that existed in the days of Moses was a creature unto itself, meaning it was a very unique kind of species, and the sages did not determine whether it was a type of a undomesticated animal or if it was a domesticated. I mean, you have a chaya and you have a behema. Behema is a domesticated animal. A sheep, a goat, a cow, they're domesticated. Then you have wild animals, deer, antelope, wild animals. So they weren't sure if it was domesticated or if it was a chaya, behema, they weren't sure. However, the Gemara continues, here's what we do know. It had a single horn on its forehead. I'm quoting to you direct translation, direct from the Babylonian Talmud. It had a single horn on its forehead, and this Tachash happened to come to Moses for the moment while the tabernacle was being, the word happened is not a good translation, I think it's from Sefaria. Ulafisha means temporarily at the time that Moses was building the tabernacle, it arrived to Moses, and he made the covering for the tabernacle from it. And from then on, the Tachash was suppressed and is no longer found. Very interesting. So the Gemara is telling us, the Babylonian Talmud is telling us, that this Tachash animal was a unique animal. We're not even exactly sure what's its category. Is it a wild animal, domestic, like a deer, running free in the wilderness? Is it a domesticated animal, like a goat? We don't know. A horse? A pony? We don't know. But we know it had a single horn on its forehead, and it came only for the times of Moses. After the Mishkan was built, it no longer had a purpose. It's gone. Okay. Now, it doesn't even more, what?
So it came only for the building of the Mishkan.
So it came for the building of the Mishkan, that's correct. So it came for the building of the Mishkan, and here we have a clear source that the Tachash animal used in the building of the Mishkan is a one-horned animal that was a unique animal that does not still exist anymore. There is no English word to describe this animal because it doesn't exist. After Moshe utilized it for the purpose for which it needed to be utilized for, it went away. Now, I'm going to show you the next piece of Gemara, something even more famous, something more fascinating to me, which is less famous. Something even more fascinating about this one-horned animal. You ready for this? So now we're going to continue. It's a little bit later in the Gemara, but the same discussion. And here the Gemara says, I'm going to share the screen again, from the fact that this is much later, from the fact that it is said that the Tachash had a single horn on its forehead, conclude from this that it was kosher. Before I read this. So the Gemara is trying to discuss, is it kosher, is it not kosher? Are you allowed to use non-kosher animals? There's a rule that for a davar shebekdusha, for something of holiness, you can only use kosher things. So tefillin are made, for example, from a kosher animal, from the skin of a cow. You can't use horse skin for a tefillin. Whole discussion if tefillin is unique, if that rule only for something, a tefillin, the whole discussion. And then at the end of the discussion, it goes back to the Tachash. At the very end of the whole discussion, and here it comes back and it says this as follows. From the fact that the Tachash had only one horn on its forehead, right, the one horn, conclude from this that it was kosher. As Rav Yehuda said, the ox that Adam, the first man, sacrificed as a thanks offering for his life being spared, had a single horn on its forehead. As stated, and it shall please the Lord better than a single horned makrin and a hooved ox. The word, let me explain what the verse means. There's a verse in Tehillim, in Psalms, chapter 69. And there it says that when King Adam was praising God, he said, it will please the Lord better than a makrin. Makrin, the way it's spelled with the yud, would mean one keren. Keren is a horn. Really, when an animal has two horns, it would be karnayim. It says makrin in the pasuk, it means singular horn. So the verse in Psalms that says makrin means one horn. One horn and a hooved ox. A hooved ox. So here is a source, according to Rav Yehuda, that the Tachash animal is a kosher animal. What's his source? Because Adam Harishon, Adam, the first man, he offered an offering to God. Do you know what his offering was? A one-horned animal. And obviously, Adam brought a kosher animal to God. Obviously brought a kosher animal to God. A one-horned animal. This, I think, is fascinating. Not just that the Tachash, the one-horned animal, was used in the Mishkan, but that this was the unique offering that Adam gave to God is a one-horned animal. But then the Gemara says, but you have a keresh. And a keresh is also a type of undomesticated animal, and it has only a single horn. So therefore, it is also possible to say that the Tachash is a type of a chaya, meaning a wild, undomesticated animal, which would not be kosher. And the Gemara leaves the answer unresolved. We have two opinions. We can say that the Tachash is kosher, and it's similar to the animal that Adam offered as an offering to Hashem, the beginning of history, or you can say that it's similar to a keresh, the one-horned animal, which is a wild animal, and therefore we don't know. Yes, question.
Does an animal to be considered kosher have to be domesticated?
No, you can have.
Matter that it's undomesticated.
No, you can have undomesticated. A deer is kosher.
Right.
Deer is kosher. A giraffe is kosher.
So what does it matter if it's domesticated or not?
I guess it's kosher. It's a good question.
Giraffe is kosher.
Giraffe is kosher. We don't shech the giraffe because the neck is too long, so we don't know where to eat it, where to slaughter it properly. So it became accepted not to slaughter it. But in general, but hypothetically, a giraffe chews its cud and has split hooves. So a giraffe would be kosher. Yes.
Someone told me when I was in Hillel, the rabbi who ran the Hillel chapter said that hunting is not kosher. So if you go out and hunt an animal and then cook that and slaughter the animal in a kosher way and cook it, it's still not kosher because of the way you killed it when you killed it.
So you are correct. Hunting is not kosher. Let's not go into hunting. You cannot, if you hunt an animal and kill it, you can't eat it. You would have to. The only way that you could possibly do it is if hunting for sport is forbidden. If you tranquilize the animal and then you will be able to slaughter it. But we're going off subject. It's a very good.
What did they do in the Bible days when the men would go out and get food for the families, like
they had domesticated animals. They had sheep. They had chickens. They had cows. Most people don't go hunting for food. They have farms where they raise cattle to. Okay, the Indians were not hunting for food, but generally speaking, people had farms and they raised cattle and they raised chickens. Okay, excellent question. Alice Groves asking an excellent question about the shamir snail, which is a very good question. But I actually was reading about it a little bit, but so. There's a general discussion here if this Tachash animal is kosher or not kosher. In the Talmud Yerushalmi, I didn't want to start quoting every single source that I could find for you, just to show that I did my homework. But in the Jerusalem Talmud, I bring three opinions as to what this Tachash animal is. The first two opinions, that of Rabbi Yehuda, not of Rabbi Nechemiah, are other Hebrew or Aramaic names. You don't know what they are. The type of dye, the different ways of understanding what they mean. And the third opinion says that it was a kosher animal that lived in the wilderness. And you can see that was a miracle that God made the animal that doesn't normally live there come to be there for Moshe. Anyway, but let's not get too into it. I do want to tell you a medrash. Okay? There's a medrash Tanchuma. Medrash Tanchuma is a very reliable source. And it tells us that this Tachash was a large, wild, kosher animal that had one single horn with a skin made up of 6 colors. This is, I'm quoting to you the Medrash, and its length was 30 amos. 30 amos is about 50 feet, 45, 50 feet long. Huge. Yeah. Meaning one animal, exactly. The length of this animal is basically the size of the Mishkan. 30 amos is exactly the length of the Mishkan's building, meaning it wasn't chashim, wasn't the skin of many Tachash animals. There was one Tachash, one single Tachash. And from that one single animal with 6 colors on its skin, with one horn, he killed it, he took the skin, and that's where the skin of the Tachash was. I also read that it was a And someone said there was a dolphin that was like water. It was a water resistant skin. Skin that the water rolls off of it, that it wouldn't get absorbed. So that was the top layer to protect it. It was outdoors. You make regular wool, whatever, it gets wet, it can start shrinking, so the dyes can start to run. So this Tachash skin had a water resistant to water repellent characteristic inside it. Anyway, what's the takeaway from all this? You ready for the punchline? What's the takeaway from all this? Well, he needed a chauffeur. Somebody needed a chauffeur. But the chauffeur has to come from the kosher animal. Could be. What's the takeaway from all this? That it seems very clear from multiple authentic Jewish sources that the animal that was used for the Tachash, Rashi tells us in Pshuta Shalmikra, the simple reading, is a one-horned animal, which is the definition of a unicorn. The word unicorn comes from the word uni is one. I had it somewhere before. A corn is a horn. There's a Latin word for corsinius or something. The original word for unicorn is mono corsinius, something like that. So that's the hence became a unicorn. The question is, so to say that the Tachash is a unicorn is easy to say. You know why it's easy to say? Because no one knows exactly what a unicorn is. So what is a unicorn? No one really knows. Is it a wild, I don't even say the way the original was written, a wild donkey, a wild horse, or I read one place that it's a goat. Today, a unicorn is usually treated as a pony, right? Or as a horse. It's not a kosher animal. Now, if you look at, when I was looking at the horse in the sources for unicorns, the original all said it was a wild donkey. Aristotle, this first guy from Greece, they all wrote about a wild donkey. What do they know? But that was the original source. But then it became a pony because I guess it's cute. I read one place it's a goat. So the question is, if a unicorn is for sure, let's say a pony, which is not its mythical source, so the Tachash was not a pony. That we know it wasn't. But no one can tell you with any kind of clarity that the unicorn is such and such animal. No one knows. And guess what? In Torah, we don't have clarity. The Gemara ends off with a debate with two different opinions if the Tachash animal was a domesticated animal or a not domesticated animal. If it was kosher, from the Talmud Yerushalmi, we have three opinions. The third opinion says it was a kosher animal living in the wilderness, implying, well, it's not explicit, but it's implying that the first two opinions hold that it was a not kosher animal. So if in rabbinic sources we don't have clarity if the Tachash is a wild animal or a domesticated animal, and if in mythical sources we don't have clarity on what kind of animal the unicorn is, so I feel very confident on record saying the Tachash was a unicorn. Okay? It was a unicorn. It was a whole animal with one horn. Because that's all we know about a unicorn. It was a monocorsinius. It had one horn. The color, so the color has changed if it was white. And same thing, if you look in the one historian says that the unicorn was white. One says it was a reddish dye. One says it was other colors. So, and in the Torah too, we're not sure, but the Medrash Tanchuma, but the Medrash Sazguna, where Rashi tells it had many colors. And the Medrash Tanchuma says that it had 6 colors. So the idea of a multicolored animal that had one horn, let's say that that's the definition of a unicorn. An animal with many beautiful colors and one horn, that is the Tachash. That is the Tachash, yes.
The same word I heard it used in relation to Joseph jacket that is
Coat of many colors.
coat of many colors. That's what I mean.
So that's going to be many colors. That's not the code of Yosef. Yosef is not the Tachash.
Connection, but
The connection to Yosef and the Tachash, not that I'm aware of. Okay, anyway, so
there's a song.
that was the fun part. It's really cool to be able to say that there's a unicorn and the Torah has a unicorn. Of course, every myth and every story, whether it's the Arthur's sword or King Arthur's sword, all these myths, all these stories, they all begin in Torah. We talked about the sword with Moshe and Yisro and the staff. They all begin in Torah. And so to the unicorn, like anything else that exists in the universe, begins in the Torah. What I found fascinating personally when researching this is that Adam Harishon also used a one-horned animal, sign of beauty, in the middle of the head, beautiful sign, I guess it wouldn't be chesed and gvur, but tiferes, whatever, a beautiful animal. How you could use a non-kosher animal, according to those opinions that the unicorn's not kosher, it's a whole discussion. I'll share with you one Kabbalistic idea, and then we're going to get to the real meat of the discussion tonight, is What can we learn from this? And why is it not here? And you'll see how they're connected. There's a great Kabbalist called the Radbaz, Rabbi David ibn Zimra. The Radbaz explains in his Kabbalistic work, the Magen David, that the world cannot exist without negativity, without gvura, without forces of klipa that are shells that hide and conceal and fight against chesed. You wouldn't have a balance in the world, and only through gevura in the world can the wicked be brought to do repentance. And therefore, since everything in the universe has to come through the Mishkan, that's like the opening of the world. Later with the temple, that'll be the opening of the world. And therefore, there has to be a source for negativity in the holy place of the Mishkan as well, in Torah as well. And therefore, the Mishkan, to truly transform the world, had to even contain within it elements of non-kosher to allow it to truly transform the universe. Understand? And therefore, there's a few different items in the Mishkan. There was a snail that was used, that was mentioned before, and that wasn't actually in the Mishkan. But the incense, the Ketores, had something called musk, a musk, mar. The whole discussion what it is, my daughter's name Mushka, but the musk, according to some opinions, is from the glands of turkeys, the sort of non-kosher animals that would secrete a beautiful perfume. You have a few things in the temple that were non-kosher, and that's its elevation. Anyway, I want to end with that. There's a good question about the blue tcheles, the tzitzis.
Yes.
The tzitzis that are dyed blue, that's not tachash, that's tcheles. Tcheles is a blue. One of the wools that was used in the making of the curtains in the Mishkan is tcheles, which was mentioned in verse number 3 or verse number 4. In verse number 4 of chapter 25, it talks about the tcheles. But that's not the tachash that we're discussing here. Okay. So now I see another good question here about an animal from the dinosaur extinction. So dragons, leviathans, behemoths, a hippopotamus, a rhinoceros species no longer exists. Okay, so let's talk about these species that no longer exist. Where did the Tachash go? Where did the Tachash go? This is going to answer the question that Paula Hinton is asking. Where happened to the Tachash go? Yes.
There's a kid's song that says that the unicorn was playing around and missed the boat.
The unicorn was playing around, missed the boat. Okay. Not to get too distracted, but there is a medrash that says that there were animals in Noah that were too big to fit inside the ark. And they, because they couldn't fit inside the ark, they drowned. And the fact that we have animals that are, I don't know how big are dinosaurs, hundreds of feet long, etc., whatever their sizes are, Torah totally can accept the idea that there were animals that were 100 feet long or whatever they were that didn't fit inside the ark. And the fact, that they're aged by carbon dating to be 45 billion years old or whatever it is not a problem, because we know that what happened during the flood, the water was bubbling and boiling for 40 days and 40 nights, boiling hot, almost like lava, like from the depths of the earth, like volcanoes was erupting, boiling hot wells of hot springs. Today the world only has one in Tiberias, but natural hot springs were pouring up from the depths of the universe, and the rain was coming, and everything was cooking. So you take a bone, not like you take a bone and leave it on the ground for 40 days and see what happens to it. Take a bone, cook it for 40 days straight in boiling hot water. How can you tell how old it is? It's been totally transformed. All of its natural compositions have been totally altered. So the fact that it looks today like it could be 40 million years old is not a conflict at all with the idea of the Torah's age of the universe and the fact that there were large animals and that they existed up until the time of the flood, and then they became extinct because they didn't make it through the flood. But so the question, I don't know if we went to dinosaurs, because it was asked on Facebook and you were asking, but when the animal, what happened to the Tachash animal? And we kind of already read the answer. What's the answer? What did Rashi tell us? The Talmud said it as well in slightly different words. The animal only existed for when Moshe needed it for the building of the ark. For the building of the ark. She got into my head, Corinne. But only when Moshe needed it for the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. Once there was no longer a need for a Mishkan, for this animal to build the Mishkan, There was no longer a need for a multicolored animal with one horn to exist in the world. It has fulfilled its divine purpose, and therefore it ceased to exist. It ceased to exist. Now, this is a very important idea, because as Jews, we all believe in something called intelligent design. What's intelligent design? One of the proofs that God made the world is the fact that when you walk into, let's say you walk into this very beautiful shul right here, right? And you look around and you count the ceiling time, you see the Ner Tam in front of me, and you see and you say, why is there a light hanging there? Oh, by accident, somehow it fell there. Right? So those on camera can't see, but right over my head is a very beautiful Ner Tam with a very nice flame-like design. It's very pretty. And if I would tell you it just fell there, you know it's impossible. In fact, it's perfectly centered in between the two walls, the two openings of the Aron Kodesh, right? It's perfectly aligned right in the middle, in the very middle of that square. It's perfect. It's right centered. The contractor did a good job centering that. I get it. It looks like it's pretty centered, right? So the contractor centered it right there. So that's called intelligent design. So if you were to walk in and say, oh yeah, look, a light just fell. It didn't fall smack into the very center of the tile, center to the openings of the Aron Kodesh, right? Didn't just fall there. There was a design. This was chosen to fit the decor of this room, to fit into this place. And it was exactly where it belongs. That's a very basic example. The idea that when you know this, that when something is where it is, it's there for a reason. It's not there. How much more so, how much more so, how much more so. The complexity of the world, the beauty, the intricacy of the human body, the tremendous level of detail that exists in our universe. We're not living in a basic, simplistic universe. We're living in a highly complex universe with billions upon billions of different kinds of species and insects and flowers and reefs and birds, and the level of design of all for a purpose called intelligent design. And so therefore, because we believe in a designer to the universe, we believe in the contractor of all contractors, if you will, and the architect of all architects, and the interior designer of all interior designers, king of all kings, God himself. So we believe that everything that exists in the world exists for a divine purpose. And the moment that purpose is no longer needed, it's over. There's no more purpose anymore, right? So the purpose is only there for, the object is only there to fulfill a divine purpose. There's a very beautiful story with King David. I think it's in the Medrash. Maybe it's in the Gemara. I don't remember anymore. It's a beautiful story. David HaMelech wanted to know why God made spiders. That and bees. That and bees. I don't remember. He was one day, King David, talking to God. He says, God, why did you make a spider? They're disgusting, they're creepy, they're crawly, they scare women, you scared of spiders? Yeah, so why would you make a spider to scare Vivi? She's such a nice lady. Why would you want to scare her? Right? So God said, and bees, bees. So God said, one day you'll see that you're going to need the spider to save your life. You're going to need the bee, and you're going to see that they're actually. What happened? David HaMelech is running away from his father-in-law, King Saul, who wants to kill him. If you know the history, if not, go read it. It's a beautiful story. Beautiful. So he's running and he's hiding from his father-in-law, and Shaul, the king's, his army is chasing after David in the hills, and David runs into a cave somewhere, and then they're chasing after him. He goes to lie down, and right away a spider comes and makes a spider web right across the opening of the entire entrance of the cave. Right after the king walked in. So the guards are running, they're looking at all the caves, and they come to this cave, they're about to run in to go look in the cave where David would be cornered and would be killed. And they say, oh, there's a big spider web right in the door. So obviously he didn't run in here. The spider web is right here. There's no way that he ran in. And so they didn't even bother looking inside, they just kept on going, and that's how his life was saved. And David said the spider is existing for a reason. God created spiders, and this spider was there waiting for years and years. But it'll be at the right moment to save King David's life.
There is a difference, though. We still have spiders, but we don't have unicorns.
I'll talk about that. So the same thing. It's an excellent question. I'll repeat your question. We still have spiders, and we don't have unicorns. the bee, just to finish the story, the bee was afterwards when he was ready the king. So one day, I think it was Queen Sheva, came to test King David, and so they came with flowers. Some were real flowers, and some were fake flowers that looked like real flowers. And I said, if you're so smart, could you tell which is the real one and which is the fake one? And King David prayed to God, said, how will I know? In that moment, the bee came and started sniffing the pollen of the flower, and that's how we knew. He said, this is the one, this lady's holding the real flowers, and she's holding the fake flowers, and is brilliant, etc. And the point is, there is nothing in this universe that exists for no reason. Even that nutnik guy that makes you crazy, and even the stone that you tripped on, you wonder why I have to fall and hurt myself. Why is there a bee? Why is there a spider? The cockroach? Anything and everything that exists in the world, God made it for a reason. It's very important to remember that, because very easily we get distracted. And of course, we accept God as the king of the universe. We accept that God is in charge, but we can't figure out, why would God make this hole in the sidewalk that I tripped on? Why would God make, I don't know, why would he make a cockroach? Why would God make a cockroach? Yes, you all scared of cockroaches, huh? I see a whole group of it. It's not pretty. It's more than not pretty. I've seen women shrieking. Yeah. So why would God make all of these things? And of course, the answer is God has a plan. God has a purpose. How do we know that? Because the moment that purpose is fulfilled, the moment that this no longer has something to accomplish in the world, it's gone. God has taken it away from us. And the fact that something still exists means that it still has a purpose. So I had a question myself, very similar to Robert's question, which is, Robert asked a good question. If the Tachash existed for a purpose, to make a Mishkan, and it did its purpose, now it's gone, so why do we have gold? My question was gold. It says that gold was created for the temple, to make the temple beautiful. Now we don't have a temple, why do we have gold? So what's the obvious answer? We're going to need it again for the third temple. We're going to need it again. So, well, the Tachash, we're not going to need Tachash because we're going to have a permanent building in the third temple. We're not going to have a tabernacle with a transportable, movable with curtains. The point is that as long as it can ever still be some purpose, it's there. And by the way, the same thing is true with people. Same thing is true with people. As long as God has some purpose for you, for me, for that person, for the other person, the person we can't stand, the person we love, then they're here. The moment they fulfill their purpose, nothing exists or remains in the world purposeless. In an exact universe, in a universe of intelligent design, nothing can exist for no purpose. They say that God takes the best when they're young. When they're young, they're always the best people. Why? They fulfill their purpose. And of course, it's an easy cliche to say, but there's a truth to it. God does not leave unneeded things around. In a messy house, yesterday's dinner is still on the table, right? That's a mess. In a clean house, if it's not needed, it's garbage. If it's not needed and you have it, it's clutter. It's not good. It's not good. There's no clutter in our universe. And this is so important to remember. There's no clutter. I repeat it over and over. Sometimes we think there's clutter in the universe. Sometimes we think that there's wasted things, there's wasted people, there's wasted, I heard a line about a person. This person's a waste of space. This person, I don't know what I'm saying, I've heard about a person. He's a waste of space. He just takes up space in the universe for no reason. Impossible. Impossible. If it exists, it's because God has a reason for it. So what's the message for us? What's the message for us, my friends? Someone wants to know why we have a cockroach. I don't have to ask God. I have to ask God. We'll do it with King David. King David was not worried about the cockroach. He was worried about the spider. But the cockroach is a good question. I don't know. What's the lesson? I don't know. But somewhere in the world, I can promise you that somewhere in the world, at some point, a cockroach is going to be needed to help somebody in a way that only a cockroach could do. I don't know if you want to be the one to find out, but say to God, Make my life saved by a cockroach. I'll understand why a cockroach is needed in the world. I don't know. But Azoy, we trust that God is he knows, he sees the whole picture. He knows everything. And he has a plan. Huh?
There has to be something worse than a politician.
Yeah, he has a reason for them with those two. There's everything. So what's the message for us, my friend? And I'll tell you an amazing story. What's the message for us?
Help others.
To help others, okay. Every moment of our lives exists for a purpose. Every interaction in our lives exists for a purpose. Every object we touch exists for a purpose. Every moment, every person, everything we do is supposed to have a purpose. It was designed for a purpose. Are we going to utilize that purpose? Now you're asking a very good question. The only one that can answer that question, by the way, is us. God designed it with purpose. If it exists, it has to have a purpose, or else it wouldn't exist. The only question is, can we be smart enough to see its purpose and to utilize it for its purpose? Can we live to utilize the purpose of our moment in every interaction, in everything that we do? We go to the store, well, let's say even with people, with interactions. Any time that you come face to face with another human being, God made it that way. It's not just you happen to be walking this way, he happened to be walking that way, so it happened to be that you walked by each other. The word "happen to be" is antithetical to a Jewish worldview. In Judaism, there is no "happen to be." In Judaism, there is designed by God to be. Brilliantly designed, perfectly executed to be exactly the way God said it needs to be. Hashgacha pratis, divine providence. Hashgacha pratis, and by the way, in Chassidus, we accept the premise that Hashgacha pratis, divine providence, not only on people, it's even on animals, even on leaves, even on cockroaches. God has a plan why this cockroach ran in front of you and scared you and made you jump up and your heart started beating 4,000 miles. God had a reason. What do we do with that moment? We don't know. We often don't know why God does what he does or what his plan and what his design was. But there's a reason. It's up to us to utilize that reason. And if God gives us something for a purpose, I'm going to say that harsh, but I'm going to say in a second. If God gives us something for us to utilize for a purpose, and we don't utilize it for a purpose, then we're going to lose the chance to have that object. The Tachash no longer exists because its time had come and gone. And once a time goes, that time is gone forever. Once God gives you an opportunity, if you don't utilize that opportunity, you don't utilize the moment you have and that interaction that you have to change your life, to change your world, to do what God had designed and planned for you to do, it's like the Tachash. It comes lefi sha'a, says the Gemara. It comes at the moment when Moses needed it. And after it was done, it was done. We have no idea where it is. It's gone forever. Yes.
I have a question. What could Tachash do to prevent his extinction?
The Tachash can't do anything. The question was, I'll read the question, good question. What could the Tachash do to prevent its extinction? He can't. The Tachash is a creature of God. The Tachash is not a person of free choice. Of course, but the Tachash has no free choice. Meaning the Tachash, that we can choose to utilize our purpose or not. Tachash can't choose. Tachash is created by God a certain way. The Tachash is what the Tachash is, and the Tachash is here for as long as God needs it. And the moment that we don't need it, from then on, the Tachash is suppressed, is no longer here. It's gone. So we are given moments in our lives where God has a purpose for us. We're given interactions that God has a purpose for us. We're given money. And if we use the money the right way, if we use our resources the right way, we keep it. If we don't, like a Tachash that's here now and then gone tomorrow, if we utilize our moment, we have a Mishkan. We have a home for God, a place where God can dwell. And if we don't, stop. I want to, and I thought something very interesting. I thought about this on Shabbos. This is my own theory now. I'm going to say something completely unsubstantiated. So maybe I shouldn't say it. But I said on Shabbos I would say it. And
Yes.
I think that what I'm going to say, I think it's true. I mean, that's what I'm going to say, right? Although I didn't hear this from others, my own theory. So take it or leave it. I give a disclaimer. My own theory has as much weight as I do. Last week, the Jewish community suffered a loss. You know what the loss was? I mentioned on Shabbos. The week before, there was a Jew whose name was Saul Senyudigolu. That was his name. Him and his wife Fortuna Senyudigolu, they died in a terrible earthquake in Antakya, Turkey. Right? We all know about this earthquake. It's big news. Turkey and Syria, there was two earthquakes. Now today there's another earthquake, which is another earthquake today. I don't know. Probably more people died following this soon when you see the news, but sadly, who knows what the death count will end up being? 50,000. We don't know. We don't know yet. They're still finding bodies. So anyway, this guy, Saul Senyugolu, was born in the city of Antakya in 1941. Now, this city of Antakya has actually a Hebrew name called Antioch. Antioch is from one of the ancient cities of the Jewish community. There has been a Jewish community in the city of Antioch from the story, before the story of Hanukkah. In fact, Antiochus, one of his capitals, was in this Antioch, hence his name of the city. And there were Jews living there from before Antiochus. You know that story of Hanukkah? So we're talking about a community older than Hanukkah itself. He was born to this community. When he was born, there were a few hundred Jews living in this ancient Jewish community. And when the building collapsed, this city that had 2,500 years of Jewish history from the Greek Empire founded by Alexander the Great, we're talking about, had only 14 Jews left in the city. 14 Jews left. They didn't even have a minyan. They had a beautiful shul, Torah, everything, but no minyan. Every Jew in the city had the keys to the shul. And they would go to daven whenever they would go. There was no formal services. There was no 8 o'clock minyan in the morning because there was no minyan. But they would go, and they made sure they all felt the obligation to go as often as they could to pray in the shul, to keep the shul utilized as a place of prayer. Everyone in the community was old. The youngest person was 60 years old, I think I read somewhere. And this city of Antioch, this is a story where Hannah and her 7 sons were murdered. The famous story where Hannah's 7 sons was in the city of Antioch. The Talmud tells of his stories, in this Talmud, the stories, in the Medrash of Jewish sages that lived there. Rabbi Akiva lived there. And even though you had so many empires own that territory, the Romans and the Byzantines and the Crusader states and the Mamluks and the Ottoman Empire, guess what? Jews were there through all of that. Through all of them, you had Jews living in this city. Until now, they said there was, the youngest person was 60 years old. All but 3 of them all kept kosher. They were not 100% kosher, but they all refrained from eating non-kosher meat. They were all vegetarian, etc. They still had a very strong Jewish culture, strong Jewish identity. When the Saul Senyugolu was the leader, he was a president of the community. His house was one of the buildings that completely collapsed, and the Israelis that came to do rescue work in Turkey, they found him and then his wife. They found his wife and they found him. A few days later, they found his body. And last week, Thursday, the last 8 Jews that were still alive in the city, that was died, were flown out of the city to Istanbul, Turkey. Rabbi Chitchuk, who's a Chabad rabbi in Istanbul, found a place for them. There's a video of Rabbi Chitchuk going into the synagogue after the earthquake, going there to Antiochia to take out the Torah from the synagogue. And the brother of Saul, his name is Ezra, he went outside onto the streets of Antiochia wearing tefillin. Put on tefillin, and he said that this will be the last time that a Jew puts on tefillin in this city where we've been putting on tefillin for almost 3,000 years. It's 2,500 years. Putting on tefillin in the city, last time a Jew will put on tefillin in the city. So I was thinking Shabbos, and here's my own theory. Why is it possible to be a city in the world without a Jew that's there to do a mitzvah in that place? Because whatever spiritual sparks need to be elevated in that place have been absolutely completely finished. There's no more work for a Jew to do there. It's just like it explains about the Jews not being allowed to return to Egypt. So the Torah tells us a Jew can't return to Egypt. And the Arizal explains that why can't a Jew return to Egypt? Because whatever we had to accomplish spiritually, we did. When the Jews left Egypt, we took the wealth of Egypt out of Egypt together with us. All the spiritual holiness that was embedded and deeply ingrained in the physical, tangible objects of that world have been elevated by the Jews when they left Egypt. So there's nothing left for a Jew to do there. There's no reason to be there. And we know stories both ways. Stories where a chassid, the Baal Shem Tov, ended up in some forsaken island and he blew the shofar there on Rosh Hashanah, and the king wanted him to make a shul there. He came back to the Baal Shem Tov, making a long story short. The Baal Shem Tov told him about this particular, he was shipwrecked on an island. It's a whole story. And he was there on Rosh Hashanah, the Baal Shem Tov told him to bring a shofar. And he blew the shofar. And when he came back to the Baal Shem Tov told him that, and the king wanted a Jewish community to live there. The Baal Shem Tov told him that before you went there were sparks of holiness waiting on this island for a Jew to come elevate them since the beginning of creation. For thousands of years, there were sparks of Kiddush, of holiness, waiting on this island, waiting for the moment that a Jew would come and uplift these sparks. And now that you, and if you would not have gone there and blown the shofar, Jews would have been taken there in chains to elevate the sparks that were there. But now that you went there and you blew the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, your prayers on Rosh Hashanah in this forsaken island, that which was a shipwreck, you elevated what had to be elevated there. There's no longer a need for Jews to move there, and there's no reason for me to send Jews to go live in this place. The reason why God made it that there's Jews literally everywhere you go in the world. There's Jews doing business in the most interesting places, most interesting places in the universe, in the middle of Africa, middle of, like some of the conventions, the Shulchan Zaledia, Shulchan, the middle of, how did Jews end up there? Ivory Coast. How did Jews end up in the Ivory Coast? There's Jews everywhere. Why? Because God put sparks of holiness for us in there. But once we fulfilled our mission and completed our task, there's no longer a reason for Jews to be there. That part of the world is ready for Mashiach. Let me just finish. I'll take questions. This is a lesson for us from the Tachash. Lesson for us from the Tachash is God made us beautiful. God made us with the most beautiful colors. Sasgoina. We have colors that are shining. This color, that color, we're beautiful colors. But we're given the design that God gave us. We're given the colors that God gave us for the moment. For this moment. Lefi Sha'ah is the words in the Talmud. For that time. After the moment is over, either you utilize your purpose and then you build a home for God. If not, it disappears. The moment is gone. That, my friends, in the lesson, we should be a Tachash. Shining, glowing, with beautiful colors. Shining on top of the Mishkan. Making every interaction and every moment of our lives utilized to its fullest. Okay, now I'll take questions and look at the comments. Thank you everyone that's watching from all over the world. Absolutely, unicorns are real. Benjamin, I'll be listening to the whole class and let's see what we were talking about. Okay. Shalom, let's say hello to everyone. Rhinoceros, thank you, Amuna. Thank you, Zara. Shalom Aleichem from Malaysia. Hello, Amuna Bracha. Boker Tov from Australia. Shalom, Madeline. Shalom, AG. Hello, Linda from Baltimore. Hello, Monica. I'm glad you're excited to be with us. Good morning from Uganda. Oh, talking about Uganda, Africa. Look at that. Yeah, this is about the Ivory Coast. Okay. Yes, what's your question, Corinne?
So we shouldn't be sad then that there are no more Jews in Antioch.
So this is my own theory. My own feeling is, not only we should not be sad, we should say, look, there's one part of the world that God has said the Jews have completely fulfilled what they need to do there. If God made it that no more Jews should be there, it's because God said Jews don't need to be there anymore. So the beginning of the kibbutz galus, so the ingathering of the exiles, the beginning of a part of the world that doesn't need any more divine work because it's been completed, that's my own personal perspective. Again, I made it up, but
It's better than being sad. It's not a bad idea.
yeah. In general, Chassidim always see the positive spin, but I think that I didn't make up the concept. It's explained this about Egypt, and there's other sources for this idea that we only exist in a place for as long as we're needed in that place, and once we've accomplished its mission, it no longer needs to exist anymore. Like the Tachash. Okay? Thank you, Chana Fredel. Oh, we missed you. Okay. Shira, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed. Lila Tov from Tennessee. Paul would prefer archaeological evidence of the unicorn. You're not going to find archaeological evidence because you'll see in animals. The skin color, you're not going to see an archaeological find. Even a horn, we see a horn. How do you know one part of the other horn? It'd be hard to see archaeological proof to that. Okay, thank you, Luz. And thank you, Gail. We'll see you tomorrow on for JLI. Okay. Good night, my friends.